Welcome back to Leaders, a podcast dedicated to exploring the best leaders this world has ever seen. In today's episode, we set sail into the turbulent waters of Cornelius Vanderbilt's world, where one legendary steamboat race would epitomize his leadership prowess. In the mid-19th century, the steamboat industry was booming, and Cornelius Vanderbilt had emerged as a titan within it. He was known for his shrewd business tactics and his relentless pursuit of success. However, his leadership would face one of its greatest tests during a high-stakes race along the Hudson River. Vanderbilt's rival, Daniel Drew, was a formidable competitor in the steamboat industry. Determined to assert his dominance, Vanderbilt challenged Drew to a race from New York City to Albany. The stakes were high, with reputation, pride, and lucrative contracts on the line. As the two steamboats set off, tensions ran high among the passengers and crew. Vanderbilt, known for his hands-on approach, was actively involved in navigating his vessel through treacherous waters and fierce competition. With each passing mile, the race intensified as both captains pushed their boats to the limit. Throughout the race, Vanderbilt demonstrated exemplary leadership skills. He inspired confidence in his crew, making quick and decisive decisions to gain any advantage possible. His strategic maneuvers and relentless drive propelled the Cornelius Vanderbilt forward, inching closer to victory with every turn of the paddle wheel. In a thrilling climax, the Cornelius Vanderbilt surged ahead, crossing the finish line in Albany ahead of the Daniel Drew. Vanderbilt's leadership had secured not only the victory in the race, but also cemented his reputation as a preeminent figure in the steamboat industry. This steamboat race between Vanderbilt and Drew remains a testament to his leadership and his indomitable spirit. His ability to really navigate the challenges, inspire a team, and emerge victorious amongst formidable odds continue to inspire leaders to this day. As we reflect back on this story and his legacy, we're reminded of Vanderbilt's true leadership forged in the crucible of adversity. So with that initial story of the steamboat expeditions and his early endeavors into the business industry and the leadership world, Cornelius Vanderbilt is the subject of episode 32. Last week, episode 31 was again covering a large American giant in the birth of a lot of the industry and how America was really built in John D. Rockefeller, and we are continuing that with another large figure of that era, and that is Cornelius Vanderbilt. And so that steamboat entrepreneurship really started his career. As we dive quickly into his career and some defining moments, that early career in that industry laid the foundation for his future success. So by the age of 23, he had acquired his first steamboat, the Charlotte, and began operating a ferry service between Staten Island and Manhattan. And that experience really taught him the fundamentals of logistics, customer service, business management. He did have a monopoly challenge within the steamboat industry, though. So his legal battle against the state-sanctioned steamboat monopoly represented by Aaron Ogden was a pivotal moment in his career. And there was a landmark Supreme Court case, Gibbons v. Ogden, 1824. Vanderbilt supported Thomas Gibbons in challenging Ogden's monopoly rights. The court ruled in favor of Gibbons, affirming federal authority over interstate commerce. And that experience taught Vanderbilt the importance of challenging entrenched interest and advocating for free market competition. It also demonstrated his willingness to take on powerful adversaries and fight for what he believed was right, and laying that groundwork for his future confrontations with monopolies in other industries that he will go into. He had the audacity and the foresight really to pivot into the railroad expansion and railroad industry, so his foray into that marked a significant expansion of his business empire. He really recognized the potential of railroads as a more efficient mode of transportation, and began acquiring and consolidating railroad lines in the northeastern U.S. So that strategic vision and bold expansion demonstrated his ability to really adapt to changing market dynamics, capitalize on emerging opportunities. His willingness to embrace new technology and industry reflects his forward-thinking leadership approach. He does get into a Erie Railroad War, so the involvement in that in the 1860s showed his skills and his leadership in intense pressure. So as rival factions vied for control of the Erie Railroad, he orchestrated a series of strategic maneuvers, including stock purchases and proxy battles to gain control of the company. His tenacity, resourcefulness, and strategic acumen during the railroad wars underscored his ability to navigate complex corporate battles and emerge victorious. That willingness to take calculated risk and skill in mobilizing resources highlighted key leadership qualities for that. Sort of the last era of him is in the philanthropic legacy, so his later years were devoted a significant portion of his wealth to philanthropic causes, including the endowment of Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And that legacy reflects his commitment to giving back to society, investing in education and welfare of future generations. It also reflects his values of generosity, community service, leaving positive legacy. So that was a quick overview of some of his kind of captivating career moments, and let's go more now into his leadership style, some of the philosophies. So how was he described by others? Ruthless, really an unquenchable thirst for conquest, and while also having that, he did it at a very cost-conscious effort, so he was known for his frugality. One thing that's mentioned within the podcast and material on Vanderbilt is that great leaders are highlighted in being able to see around corners and really look into the future and place all their chips into particularly areas that aren't immediately obvious. And so as we see his first foray into steamboats and has a ton of ship inventory, he ends up selling all of that and goes all in on railroads before really much was built in that regard. So he was able to see around that corner and grow his market, which is one of the first characteristics of Vanderbilt. And so he understood the benefits of increasing patronage by lowering prices. A strategy that we can parallel back to episode 25, and that was on Southwest Airlines. Former CEO Herb Kelleher, who says, charge low fares, get more people to fly, get them to fly more often, and you will produce the best return to shareholders. Soon after Vanderbilt launched the Bologna on a new season of high-speed competition powered by another cut in the fare to Philadelphia. The repeated price reductions were a stark departure from the past. They delivered a competitive advantage, of course, but also showed that Gibson's and Vanderbilt believed in a growing market, that more and more people wanted to travel between two cities and would do so by steamboat if rates were cheap enough. This notion of expanding economy was surprisingly new. The Livingston's North River Steamboat Company had kept the same number of boats running to Albany at the same fare for years and saw ridership steadily drop. They believed there was a natural number of passengers and that competition was destructive, robbing them of their due. One other thing, while growing the market and cutting cost, he also increased efficiency. So he says, how do I make a profit? Vanderbilt would rhetorically ask in court in 1869, I make it by a saving of the expenditures. If I cannot use the capital of the road for pretty nigh $2 million per year, better than anyone else has ever been in it, then I do not want to be in the road. He would elaborate at length on his approach. That has been my principle with steamships. I never had any advantage of anybody in running steamships, but if I could not run a steamship alongside another man and do it as well, For 20% less than it cost him, I would leave the ship. Within his organizations, too, Vanderbilt tried to establish a culture and tone at the top. So what he did was set general policies as well as the overall tone of management. Any corporation has an internal culture shaped by the demands, directives, and expectations that rain down from above. The Commodore created an atmosphere of efficiency, frugality, and diligence, as well as swift retribution for dishonesty or sloth. Every employee knew he was watching. Employees, he developed a customer focus. So that testimony of Vanderbilt and his men produced a decided change in public sentiment, which had previously run altogether in favor of the central management, the Times reported. For one thing, Vanderbilt had a chance to present himself in his own terms. I have always served the public to the best of my ability, he remarked. Why? Because like every other man, it is in my interest to do so and to put them to as little inconvenience as possible. One other quality that goes along with this that we've already highlighted here, as well as within a lot of the other profiles of these leaders, is the ability to evolve and adapt. So, nicknamed the Commodore, Vanderbilt's character played a role as well. Over the decades, his personality had evolved in parallel with his changing material interest. He had earned his reputation as a ferocious competitor in steamboats, a business notoriously prone to warfare due to the low startup costs and the inherent mobility of the physical capital, the steamers, which allowed a proprietor to fight on one route after another. It was also a time in his life when New York's merchant aristocrats derided him as a boorish outsider. After devoting himself to railroads, however, he had consistently pursued peace, seeking industry-wide agreements, though he remained ready to fight when attacked. The transformation reflected the nature of the railroad business, but it also suited his late life status. So this, again, back to a common theme, is the leader that you are born into, or the leader that you start a company with, is not the leader that you are going to probably see at the end of that company or that person's career. And this is described within Vanderbilt. He was seen as fierce, but, in a certain industry, you may have to adapt your leadership style based on that industry, which he did in his later years. The elite now thought of him as an honorable and high-toned gentleman, precisely the sort of man who sought dignified agreements, not economic bloodletting. So Vanderbilt, I think, would also be described as a bold leader, and there are several descriptions and ways of which he is a bold leader and he's one of composure and focus, I think, first. So the media often depicted him as an unrefined and ruthless businessman. In fact, the title robber baron was a commentary on Vanderbilt and his business practices. In the early 1860s, he fought overpriced monopolies and companies heavily subsidized by taxpayers' money. Determined to create an open market, Vanderbilt's strategy was to offer better services at a fraction of the price. Unfazed by criticisms, the tycoon pressed on with eyes focused on the goal. Him as a bold leader, too, recognized opportunities from afar. So opportunities often come disguised as challenges. He often confirmed this reality many times in his life. One sort of instance of that was the acquisition of the New York and Harlem Railroad in 1864. The railroad we famously know as the Harlem was almost worthless when Vanderbilt took over the track. But he knew the Harlem had potential, so it was the only railroad that cut through the center of Manhattan. 5 years later, he put the Harlem together with the Hudson River Railroad to form the New York Central and Hudson River Railroad. That merging of those two railroads was a precursor to the much larger now New York Central Railroad. In 1850, a decade before the Civil War, the U.S. economy was small. It wasn't much bigger than Italy's. 40 years later, it was the largest in the world. What happened in between was the railroads. They linked the east to the west and the interior to both. They gave access to the east industrial goods. They made possible economies of scale. They stimulated steel and manufacturing, and the economy was never the same. So his legacy provides some timeless and universal lessons in business success, thriving in an era of enormous technological change as railways revolutionized the economy. His approach to business is evident in many of the successful businesses we see today. So him tapping new markets through lower prices, respecting shareholders, sharing scale advantages, and sacrificing short-term profits for long-term gains. He held himself to a higher moral compass than his ruthless competitors. A lifetime spent in shipping proved no impediment to grasping the opportunity the nascent railway industry presented. Striving always for competitive advantages, he once leveraged the benefits of scale to deliver his customers lower fares. He was amply rewarded for that, and he vastly improved and expanded the nation's transportation infrastructure, contributing to a transformation of the geography of the U.S., embracing new technologies, new forms of business organization, used them to compete. He really helped to create, in a sense, the corporate economy that would define the U.S. into the 21st century. So definitely saw lots of economic boom from the production and development of the railroads guided by Vanderbilt. That would come with some failures and challenges that I think we should also highlight. So before the railroads, too, he had some early setbacks in the steamboat industry. So he initially faced some stiff competition, financial setbacks in that, struggling to establish himself. From that, he learned the importance of resilience and adaptability, understood that failure is often the part of the path to success, essential to persevere in the face of adversity. There came legal battles and monopoly accusations. He faced that throughout his career, particularly during his consolidation of the steamship industry. And those legal battles taught him the importance of ethical leadership and the need to navigate complex legal and regulatory landscapes with integrity. Likely learning also that sustainable success requires not only strategic vision, but a conduct and compliance with laws and regulations. This, again, also paralleled into what Rockefeller ran into from a monopoly standpoint with his oil industry, and what ended up breaking that up as well with the legal challenges there that were posed and were not in place before he built it, but as he built it, there were things in place that disrupted that. Vanderbilt also had family conflicts and succession planning, so he faced conflicts within his family over that and future direction of that empire. And that is a common theme, I think, also amongst these leaders is, do you have a successful succession plan in place? And is that implemented to what they had set out to? And so that's part of the legacy component for sure that we see within each of these leaders is, how does the next leader after you perform? Market shifts and economic downturns, obviously, during this time were challenging, as they were with Rockefeller and many of these leaders that we've seen. So the Panic of 1837 and the Civil War were two kind of bigger events that Vanderbilt had to navigate. Know really the importance of moving quickly and the foresight in anticipating and responding to market changes, economic uncertainties of war, legislation, other things of where to go. Mentors and heroes will be the final section again here. And so his name was mentioned before, but Gibbons, or Thomas Gibbons, was a steamboat entrepreneur who operated a ferry service between New York and New Jersey, competing against the state-sanctioned monopoly of Aaron Ogden. Vanderbilt worked for Gibbons in his early career and later became involved in that landmark Supreme Court case that challenged these laws. Vanderbilt learned from that process and learned from Gibbons that there was an importance on challenging established monopolies and government regulations that hindered competition. He would have firsthand been the power of innovation and disruption and breaking through entrenched interests as well. Another mentor would be Daniel D. Tompkins. So he was a former governor of New York and VP of the U.S. under James Monroe. He served as a mentor and patron to Vanderbilt in his early career, providing him with both financial support and opportunities for advancement. And from Tompkins, he learned the value of cultivating influential connections, leveraging political relationships to advance his business interests. He did have some business rivals and competitors throughout his career. Figures such as Robert Fulton, Aaron Ogden, Daniel Drew were competitors, and from them he could learn strategic thinking, competitive analysis, bold action, and staying ahead of that competition. His own rightfully experiences and failures taught him a lot too, and were a mentor of sorts. So he learned through trial and error, constantly adapting those strategies and tactics based on the lessons learned from his successes and setbacks. He really had a self-reliance and resilience that were forged amongst this, so that was another learning lesson. And finally, three prominent historical figures that he would view as perhaps heroes of his. So George Washington being the first, embodying many of the qualities that Vanderbilt himself valued: leadership, courage, patriotism. Washington's rise from modest beginnings to becoming the first president likely resonated with his narrative of self-made success. Another founding father, Thomas Jefferson, principal author of the Declaration, was renowned for his intellect, vision, and commitment to liberty and democracy. Vanderbilt valued that independence and freedom and admired his philosophical ideals and political leadership. And finally, Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of the U.S., was known for his populist appeal, championing the common man. Vanderbilt rose to prominence through his own efforts in transportation industry and respected his defiance of entrenched interest and support for economic democracy. And so with that, another sort of key figure in the building of America, from John D. Rockefeller to now Cornelius Vanderbilt within the steamship and railroad industries. He was a prominent figure, a very powerful and rich figure that came with great leadership qualities as well. So episode 32 here was Cornelius Vanderbilt, and we will be back here soon for episode 33. Thanks for listening.